Let's turn our attention now to the latest business news and a threat from the United States to impose more tariffs on imports from the European Union. Our business editor Stephen Carl is here with all the details. Stephen.
Eve, this is not a new trade war. It's actually part of a long-running dispute over subsidies for aircraft builders. The United States is upping the ante, though, adding 89 products to the list that it says it'll consider imposing tariffs on in retaliation for what it says is unfair European support for Airbus. Now, the products on the list, published by the US Trade Representative, are worth some $4 billion in imports. They include cheeses like Edam, Gouda and Parmesan, Scottish and Irish whiskey, olives, pasta, coffee, meat, many other products as well. Now, so far, these products are just on a long list that could be subject to tariffs. This after the World Trade Organization ruled that the EU had violated international trade rules with subsidies to Airbus. Washington estimates the damage from those subsidies was $11 billion. The WTO will authorise the US to take countermeasures in the coming months, and this list is part of the preparation for those countermeasures. This dispute, despite the cooling of trade tensions that was agreed between President Trump and EU Commission President Juncker last year. Meanwhile, the European Union has its own case pending at the WTO over US subsidies to Boeing. Well, it was the subject of trade that also boosted shares on Wall Street to a record close on Monday. Investors taking cheer from renewed hopes that the United States and China would find a way to resolve their dispute. Presidents Xi and Trump agreeing to restart talks after a meeting in Japan over the weekend. The S&P 500 index finished the day up less than 1%, but at an all-time high for the index, just under 3,000 points, 2,964. Technology shares in particular getting a boost. That's after Donald Trump signalled that he might allow US companies to sell software and equipment again to China's Huawei, which have been a big issue for that industry. If we take a look at what's happening on the Asian markets today, the optimism today winning in some of the markets. We can see small gains on the Nikkei in Tokyo, the Hang Seng in Hong Kong up by 1.2%. Just small falls in Shanghai and on the Kospi in Seoul. Now, there are some market watchers rightly pointing out that Beijing and Washington still face the same difficulties that caused talks to break down in May. So there is a risk of this latest optimism turning sour. On the currency markets, the euro is trading for just under $1.13 and 89 pence sterling as well. Now, we're keeping an eye on oil prices for you today as well. The international benchmark price for oil, Brent crude, holding on to its gains from yesterday, over $65 a barrel, 59 for WTI. This is after the oil-producing cartel OPEC agreed to extend production cuts that were designed to boost oil prices. Today, they're meeting with non-OPEC members, including Russia, to see if they'll join the effort. Claire Muffson has the details.
OPEC and its allies are on track to extend oil supply cuts by 9 months as energy ministers meet in Vienna.
Everyone supported the proposition to extend the limits agreed in December for another 9 months.
The group has been reducing oil output since 2017 to prevent prices from sliding amid soaring production from U.S. shale fields. The latest effort was spearheaded by Russian President Vladimir Putin and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. They struck a deal at the G20 this weekend to extend existing output cuts of 1.2 million barrels per day, or 1.2% of global output. But Russia isn't an OPEC member. Its alliance with Saudi Arabia, the group's biggest producer, has sidelined traditional members like Iran. Iran's oil minister said the pair's dominance threatens OPEC's very existence. Other members aren't worried.
I wouldn't agree that OPEC is dying. I believe strongly that OPEC is a cooperation of sovereign countries, and these countries have agreed to work together.
Geopolitical turmoil and production problems in markets including Iran and Venezuela have led to concerns about supply. But there are also fears that a global slowdown will lower demand. OPEC will hold further talks with non-member countries on Tuesday.
Well, finally from me, and perhaps encouraging statistic from Norway, in the first half of 2019, 45% of all cars sold in the country were electric vehicles. Now, that's largely thanks to the booming sales for Tesla's Model 3. They counted for more than a sixth of all new vehicles sold in Norway between January and the end of June. The share of electric cars in Norway has been increasing significantly since last year. Meanwhile, sales of petrol-fuelled cars down by almost a third compared to the same period last year. Eve, this is something that's also coming up at OPEC, is this fear that the demand for oil will fall as the economy perhaps turns a little bit sour as well. So that could have an impact too on sales of electric cars.
OK, good to know. Stephen Carroll, thanks a lot for that business update.